Setting yourself up for massive focus is relatively easy. And the reason being is because if you have less things contending with your brain, you are much more likely to slip into these highly productive states where you're flowing, you're focusing, your attention is there, and you're producing the maximum possible output that you can get out of any work session, deep work, or whatever it may be. Now, we talked about contenders, right? Having all these things your brain can be contending with, just taking your attention and focus away from the actual work and then keeping you procrastinating, overthinking, being in a state of anxiety. Obviously, you don't want that. So there are going to be 4 areas we're going to be talking about where if you do not have them properly optimized, it can be contending with your brain and preventing you from achieving this peak state of performance you can get to. Now, the 4 we're going to be talking about are motivators. It is the challenge skill ratio, it is goals, and then it is also feedback. The very first one that I want to talk about is motivators. When it comes to motivators, there are 2 kinds. There are extrinsic and intrinsic motivators. Extrinsic motivators are anything that is material. It might be status. It might be possessions. It could be all these things. Now, it's not to say that these motivators are bad because they can be good. And I have to say that sometimes I'm motivated by extrinsic ones. But think about it. When you are setting a foundation for something, maybe for a business or something, you want to make sure over the long run it is sustainable and that it's possible to continue doing it in the long run rather than towards some short-ended or short-minded goals. Because when you do it with the latter, what happens is that eventually it's going to crash and burn, and you obviously don't want to burn your own empire, and in this case it is your own life. So what you want to do instead is optimize for intrinsic motivators, which are basically like infinite fuel, which never really burn or tire you out. And it's also possible where I notice where at times where I just feel really on purpose and on site with something important I believe I'm working with, like burnout is just not there. It's because there's all this drive just being intrinsically generated, whether it's from targeting my values or even targeting some of these big 3 motivators I'm going to be talking about in just a moment. It's just like you have this infinite energy reservoir just within you, available at all times. Now, there's this intrinsic motivation theory, which basically says that these are some of the biggest intrinsic motivators that humans want and crave in their life. Now, the 3 are autonomy, competence, and relatedness. If you can get these 3, you basically have on deck some of the biggest intrinsic motivators at your disposal to promote this sort of focused, increased intention in anything that you're doing. Now, when it comes to autonomy, it's just your ability to have control over anything that you're doing, right? When we have this better sense of control and power over what we're doing, our workplace, when we show up to work, what we do at work, it just gives us this greater sense of control and calmness, I guess you can say, where it just can be a motivation in itself. Now, the next one is competence. Competence comes from your ability to improve over time with the work that you're doing. It's having that sense of mastery that when you measure something, you're doing it for XYZ period, and then you're seeing some sort of tangible or measurable feedback over time that you're actually improving and getting better at the skill. That's another source of motivation and that people find a lot of joy from. Because if you're doing something every single day, like think about it, like, are you really going to be more motivated to show up the next day? So let's say you don't know how to program at all. The next day you're trying to come in and do some sort of super complex computations and algorithms that you have completely no understanding of. Like, how is that really going to motivate you the next day, right? It's probably not. So you have to, on some measurable scale, be able to motivate yourself. In this case, it's competence. Being able to have like this sort of Kaizen mindset, which is just a sort of 1% improvement mindset every single day going into your work. And then the third motivator for this intrinsic motivation theory is the sense of relatedness, meaning you're connecting with something greater than yourself. Now, this has like a spiritual connotation to it, but it's also true when you kind of, I guess you can say, transcend the ego and you're more about improving or working towards the community or serving mankind at large or doing something where it's just greater than for yourself. You don't just isolate yourself, right? But instead, what you do is you contribute to something much larger, maybe a mission, a purpose, some sort of goal that can really contribute well to some sort of society, organization, or particular animal life or something like that. You have this greater motivation and drive just to go out and do something rather than just purely being for yourself. Now, the next area, which may be blocking you from really achieving this strong sense of focus is your inability to achieve a proper ratio of challenge and skill. When there's too much challenge in something, there is a lot of anxiety that occurs. Like we just said a few moments ago with that programming example, right? But when there's too little skill required to do something, meaning it's just so easy, it creates all this unnecessary boredom, you're not going to be motivated to do it. So it's your focus and your attention is not going to be there. Now, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, but he is a Hungarian psychologist who talked on the concept of flow. And the challenge skill ratio, that is actually a trigger which actually helps you slip into flow, into these states where you can actually really get focused with what you're doing. Now, he said that there is this fine balance between too much challenge and too much skill, where when you find the middle zone, it's just above your baseline skills, where it requires your attention, your focus, and your ability to be present with what you're doing. And when you're in that state, well, not only you're reaping the benefits of flow, which is keeping you motivated, because in flow state, you literally have the top 6 neurotransmitters being released into your brain. And what these neurotransmitters do is just provide this overabundance of pleasure chemicals, whether it's oxytocin, whether it's dopamine, serotonin. You have all these different sorts of neurochemicals being released into your brain, giving you this amazing sense of bliss and feeling doing the work that you're doing. But then you're also too, on the side of that, being extremely focused. Your sense of time disappears. The work itself becomes effortless, and you're just in this really pleasurable state. So of course you're going to be more motivated in itself just to continue doing the work. So that's with the challenge skill ratio. It's your inability to get into it if you're not already achieving that. Now, the next one, which may be blocking you from actually achieving increased senses of focus, or your inability to focus, which may be causing it, is actually having a lack of clear goals. Now, goals actually orientate us towards some sort of definitive end, and they actually provide something where we can organize all of our attention, all of our mental energy, everything towards some specific end that we find meaningful and valuable. First off, it's going to be motivation. It's going to keep you motivated, especially if it's a goal that's meaningful and actually contributes to maybe your professional development, your personal goals, or maybe it's something you really care about. So that's that. And another thing is that it has to be measurable, meaning you cannot improve anything that doesn't get measured. Now, this is where simple math comes in, simple ways of measuring how you're doing on a daily basis, especially too if you incorporate into this, and also with the challenge skill ratio, if you incorporate some sort of deliberate practice. Deliberate practice is by far one of the most effective ways you can measure your goals and how you're performing. It's because you're finding little areas of your life that you believe have need or just require some increased performance or optimization in order to help you increase the likelihood of getting to your goal. And if you are not progressing in some way, in some dimension, in whatever you're doing, then it's probably because you're not measuring it effectively. One interesting story that Ben Franklin used to do is how he practiced deliberate practice is that he would study all these great writers and publishers at his time. And then word for word, I believe it was, he would rewrite everything that they're writing so he can kind of get into the habit and I guess you can say flow of how these writers are writing their sentences. And then he would reconstruct and deconstruct all the sentences into his own way so he can kind of like take what they wrote, how they thought through it, into his own writing. And that's how Ben Franklin was able to become a really, really great writer. So it's just having a practice, a way where you can measure your work. And then, of course, when it comes to having goals, it helps you better prioritize all of your tasks, all the decisions, everything, because it's like these goals, they're your North Star. They help you organize all your attention and tasks towards these goals just so you can achieve them. And with this prioritization, it also helps you manage your time better, because if you have like deadlines or something to achieve within X months or something like that, there's no time for BS. So it's really all about organizing your time blocks and your schedules just so you can get to that goal, keeping you really focused and motivated. The last one, we already hinted on this, before, but it's having some sort of immediate feedback. Feedback is super critical. I know I already said this before. I already kind of went off on it, but I'm going to come back at it again. It's because it's super important. It can help you much more easily slip into flow. It can help you much more easily improve over time with what you're doing, providing clarity, providing some sort of measurable data just so you can see how you've been doing through time. By having this feedback, it provides the ability to be engaged and involved with your work. So it's not that you're just kind of like half-assing it, but you're actively engaged with it, becoming better and becoming present with whatever it is that you're doing. Feedback also allows you to make adjustments. If maybe you've been doing something for XYZ period and you're not getting better, hey, now you can iterate on it. With feedback also, it provides increased amounts of motivation. When we see that we're getting better, you get like little hits of dopamine, especially too if you've done dopamine detoxes and you've gotten rid of like all these other unnecessary things causing or creating this unnecessary dopamine spikes. When you're in this, I guess you can say, natural state, the dopamine rush is amazing. Like you ever just get better at a skill or something like that, and you just get this rush of amazing pleasurable feelings of, wow, I'm actually improving. That's not only mastery being hit, which is earlier from what we talked about with competence, but it's also this increased sense of motivation that you're getting better on a daily basis. And if you complement this with other values in your life that you have, like let's say growth is one, like achievement is one, then you're hitting these different motivation values on these different areas of your life that you actually really find meaningful. And that's actually sustaining your focus, sustaining your ability to continue working on the craft or the skill or whatever you may be doing in order to reach the next level. And the final note on feedback is you have to set up some sort of systems in order for you to measure this feedback. Now, some systems I set up in the past, for example, around, let's say if I was optimizing my health, it was just simple Google Doc sheets. Now there's many different ways we can do to systemize, and it also totally depends on the skill you're looking to improve for the thing you're looking to do. But it really just comes down to finding a system where you can track it, whether it's through some sheet or it's through some app you're using, or whether it's through having a mentor or a teacher providing you real-time feedback, the better. The more immediate the feedback is, the more clear it is, the more data you have, the ability to measure it through time, the more of an ability you have, the better overall, because this system will enable you to see clearly, visually, ideally, what is being improved, how you're performing right now, and how you're actually getting better through time. Again, setting ourselves up for focus is relatively quite easy. I found the most effective hack to be just finding these primers that help us slip into focus more easily to be the most effective, whether it's through motivators, the challenge skill ratio, whether it's through having clear goals or having some sort of immediate feedback. This is all just data, right? We're using our biology and some sort of just data from the environment or our internal bodies in order to become more motivated with the task at hand or the big goal that we're trying to achieve. So other than that, hope you got a lot of value from this video. I'm Jan. And if you're not subscribed to my newsletter every single week, every Saturday, I send out a free newsletter where I talk about some of the biggest insights I found on optimization, productivity, self-actualization, maybe a little bit of philosophy, and so on. So if you're interested in something like that, subscribe to my newsletter. And other than that, I'll see you in another video. Later.